Today we'll chat a little bit about what it's like to pitch yourself, pitch your idea, pitch your startup or your prototype in a way that's coherent and makes sense for people. I'd like to give you some background from sort of where I'm sitting and where I'm coming from, which will most likely give you an insight into the way people like me, venture capitalists, other kinds of investors, and also the way that we judge your prototype, think about prototypes and also startups. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a little bit of a better understanding of sort of what's required, what to think about in terms of pitching. Okay, so let me just share my screen real quick here. Press go live, and there we go. Perhaps I can even do this. You can still see my screen, right, Kuba? Okay, perfect. Okay, so my backstory or background is that I'm an energy engineer by trade. I've done a lot of weird stuff over the years. Started a couple of companies, most lately New Native, which is part of the lablab community. So it's me, Matthias, and Pavel, who has put our heads together and worked out some of the kinks here between what you're using and building with. But I'm an engineer. I like the technology side of things, and I'm trying to figure that out. You can reach out to me if you have any more questions after this. But today we're just gonna, circle in on what it means to pitch you. And so, short itinerary of what we're going to go through. Who am I? How does venture capitalist work? And how does people think about pitching your specific idea? And then a couple of examples, and then we'll reverse engineer that into tips and tricks. The best advice that I ever got was make things that people love. Don't do it for the technology. Don't do it just because, but make something that people really like. And what this is getting at is you need to be customer centric or user centric in the things that you develop. It's a lot easier to like what you're building if other people also like what you're building. So usually what we start with and where I come from, it's really important to talk to customers, get their feedback, get your users' feedback, and try to figure out what they actually need and what they actually are saying to you. And it's a hard lesson to learn because usually listening to people is something that we do every day, but it's very rarely that we really listen and comprehend what people are saying to you. So it's a skill in itself, but whenever you're planning to do something, you should really start by making things that people really love. You should highlight that. Whenever you pitch what you do, you should start from a user-centric perspective, meaning that you should tell the story of why this makes sense to people. What are the problem that you're really solving for these guys, and why are you solving that specific problem? Why is it important? Because that is the prerequisite for really great things. So my background, I've been a venture partner and mentor for a lot of the accelerator programs in United States, and pretty much worked with the bigger ones across there. And really what you see is all of these sort of big, I'll show you how they fit together, but they target different kinds of stages. And stages is an arbitrary thing. It means that you're either super early, like in a prototype phase, or you're a little more progressed in terms of making your own actual service or MVP of your service, or you could even be a full-fledged company where you've started to bring in some serious capital, start to grow into the marketplace, and start to figure out how to actually make it into a real viable business. And I've been a part of all of these different segments, which means that you get to see a lot, and you sort of can see what to do and not to do once you've looked at a couple of hundred pitches. To me, it's kind of clear that just reverting back to the first point, doing something that is customer centric is really essential. And just to relate it to what we're doing at LabLab, we're really trying to figure out how to help you guys build things quicker with AI. And so that's sort of the core component. And what we do in terms of that is we're trying to reach out, we're trying to figure out, we're trying to talk to as many people as possible to see how we can improve and become better. And that's something that I think is things that you should think about when you build your prototype as well. So like I said I'm sort of coming from the investment perspective on this. I'm just going to briefly share with you how people like me think when they hear a pitch, because it's not obvious that you can listen to 100 pitches, in a month and reiterate your own pitch as an entrepreneur. So I'll just give you the background here, what most people come in with in terms of venture capital. So, I mean, venture capital is one specific asset class when it comes to investments, and it's equity. So you buy and sell things in companies. So equity, super important things, and it usually, when it's such an early phase for a lot of you guys, you probably don't even have set up a company yet. But the first thing you usually do, and the first thing when you start to pitch your own idea, whether it's towards customers or venture capitalists, it's figuring out how this sort of fits together. But equity is the primary asset class, and it's super dynamic and it's really hard to predict, which means that people like me are trying to figure out how to actually invest properly into these kinds of companies. My hedge or bet is on AI at the moment, because I believe it will drastically change the way that people conduct their businesses in the future. And so I've sort of narrowed it down. But every investor has its own kind of niche in investment space, and also their own hypothesis on what they think will make for a great future and great returns in the future. But the entire thing is really that the higher risk you take, the higher the reward usually is, and it's up to the investors of such to figure out how to balance risk and reward in a way that makes for the most profit. So if you just sort of compare that to private equity, which is usually what you see in bigger banks and stuff like that, we aim for a lot higher multiples. So if I were to invest 100K in your startup that's valued at, I don't know, $5 million, something like that, what I'm really expecting is for that valuation to 10x within a couple of years, or at most 5 years, as opposed to private equity where it's something like 3 to 5x. And ideally, you'd become a unicorn and make me 100x on my first investment. But really, that sort of puts you in a ballpark what you should aim for if you're going for these kinds of investors. You need to show them that the market is big and that you can grow to become $1 billion company in the end in a very short amount of time. And so that all feeds into your pitch, right? It's something you need to keep in mind when you paint the picture of what the problem is, and then also how big the market is and what you will they be able to do that someone else can't in order to execute and capture this market. So as an example, this is sort of a timeline of what most people invest into. As I mentioned before, super early, you're probably here on the left-hand side, on the angel side of things. As of now, we're basically moving from an idea to a prototype. And then you're just trying to iterate and see what sticks in the market, see what people give you kind of feedback, and then move from there, right? When you move up and do more on the pre-seed side, it's usually less about just building the actual prototype, but refining that prototype into a minimum viable product, something that people actually can use, and it's not just a Figma click-through or something like that, or a presentation, right? So here you actually have a product. If you start moving up to seed, then usually, at least in the States, you usually have a little bit of a higher capital burn. You have a little bit of a bigger team, and you're usually closing something like, I don't know, $5 million, $2 to $5 million in investments. So by then, your MVP needs to be pretty good, and the entire game here is to figure out how to make it to the next level, which basically means how do you monetize, or how do you figure out what the business model is like so that it makes sense. Because in the end, you need to also have a viable business in the end, so it's not just a community project. If you do a round, then you usually have found something called product market fit, which is really where you have so much inbound and so much interest from your clients and customers that you can't really keep up, and you need more money to just hire a lot of people up front and scale the business. So here on the right-hand side, it's more towards scaling a business as opposed to figuring out how building a prototype. if you put that on a time or an axis where you have valuations and such, the evaluations are usually pretty low in a pre-seed when you start out, because there's still expectations of whether you could actually build a prototype and move that into an MVP. So there's a lot more risk to it. And the further you go to Series A, the higher valuations are. Say that a Series A valuation is probably a little higher than 20 million as indicated in this, but probably something like 50 to 100-ish. It really depends on how much money you're raising and how much you need. And on average, you would say that in each round that you raise money, you usually sell out something like between 10 and 20% of your company. And that's really because investors also want to make sure that they can get a return on the money that they allocate. And everybody has their different styles, but usually that's the sort of distribution of assets. Now, my expectations is really that you should do at least 10x over 10 years, and that's setting the bar very low. That means going from a 10 million valuation to a $100 million valuation. So what does it mean to get to $100 million in valuation? Well, valuation is driven by a couple of things. One is expected revenue, one expected value over time. So usually what people do when they look at your pitch is to discount the future value of your business down to a single number, which is really sort of valuation range that you'll see here on the left side. So 10 million, something like that. A good case is really where you get a lot. I am? Okay, let me do this then. Okay, cool. Interesting. Oh, so you haven't seen my beautiful slides, but that's all right. What I will do, I hope you can see my presentation now, right? Yeah, you can. Awesome. Yeah, besides the point, it's really about trying to build something that lasts. So given all of this information, basically there are three things that I usually look at when it comes to pitches, and it's team, it's market size, it's strategic fit to the portfolio, and sort of try to figure out whether it makes sense for me to invest. So, for instance, if you say that you have the next hot AI deal on the table, that's something that would sort of be a strategic fit for me, right? And if you also say that you have a big background building a lot of AI stuff over the past years, then that also interests me, right? Same for the market size. So let's say you're targeting speech to text transformers, and you're specifically, as we saw a couple of weeks ago, solving for stuttering problems, or something interesting like that, then I'd probably be interested in listening to you. Now then the question is really how and what should you do? How should you pitch it? And there are a couple of things that I usually propagate towards, and that's three different things. The first thing is to figure out a blurb. And a blurb is really just a 2-sentence kind of pitch of what you're doing. And the blurb is very common, specifically like around startups. It's a 30-second pitch or 15-second pitch that really makes me understand what you're doing. So I'll read up one for you here that I looked at 2 years ago or something like that. And this company is called Satchel. Satchel makes it easy for companies to rent out unused office space. We remove all the work of monthly subleasing, signing NDAs, vetting insurance, and access control. We make subleasing your office as easy as renting out an apartment on Airbnb. So it's kind of clear what they're doing, right? And you can see here that they're not saying anything about the backend technology. They're only talking about it from a user-centric perspective. So that's super helpful for me because it instantly gets me thinking about what is the problem? Is the problem worth solving? So I usually advise people to start with a blurb, just make it short and sweet, 2 sentences, or as in this case, 3 sentences that just tells the story straight up. What is it? How does it work? What are you solving? Then we usually usually what we expect to see is a one pager or two pager or something like that that describes your idea, your product, your team, and your business. And it's usually the same information as you'd see in any pitch. And a pitch is really a combination of different things, right? It's usually these are by slides, so it's usually something like 12 to 15 slide in terms of a presentation, where you can see all the or read through all the necessary things by just reading the slides page by page. And here's the usual fallacy, because the sole purpose of a pitch like this is really just to be able to send it out so that people can read through it and understand what you're doing. It's not a presentation deck. Most pitches or presentations that you'll make is not running over a pitch deck. So it'll probably most likely just be a conversation as opposed to showing this actual pitch deck. So in the pitch, it's important to have descriptions of what you actually mean, what the key bullet points on each slide is, and describe it in terms of fluent text. So I'll show you a couple of examples from Y Combinator that I kind of like in a minute. But usually what we go through, what we look at is company purpose as a first slide. Like, what are you making and how is that different from anything else? Then it's, what is the actual problem that you're solving for? What's your specific solution and why is that unique? Why is it important, or why now, really? How do you answer that question? And then also market size, competition, then your product or demo, as well as some thought about business model, how can you monetize this, and team, and then also financials. Usually in a pitch, when you have a conversation like this, you usually have something like 15 minutes to pitch your actual startup, 10 to 15 minutes, and you also need some Q&A in the end. And sometimes once you have a little bit more time, probably it can stretch up to 30 minutes. But that's pretty much all you'll ever get running through your pitch deck. And the whole purpose of a first meeting when you do a pitch like this is to just get to a due diligence or next meeting where people ask you in-depth questions about, user statistics or client statistics. How much are you selling this for? Like, what's the pipeline look like? All of that juicy stuff. So for you in this stage, it's just super early. I'd really focus on a couple of things only, and that would be like, what is your problem? What are you? How are you supposed to solve it? So really the blurb up here, and then also what is the solution, and why is the solution feasible now as opposed to before? Why, basically answering the question, why hasn't this already been built? And then just go through a demo, show people or show me or anyone else how it works. And then have a discussion of like the next step on your journey. What will you require to grow this into a larger viable business, actually? Then there's a couple of things that you should think about once you have a conversation with investors. And the first thing is really that you should never lie to investors, because they'll find out. And parts of the job is to do a lot of due diligence on top of you. So you can expect that they'll check every reference from every work that you've ever been a part of, and also dig through all your clients, all the client lists, and give them a call, see what they think about your solution. So basically what I'm saying is don't lie. The second thing is be interesting, and don't worry, because it's kind of a numbers game here. But you probably, if you have 50 meetings, then the chance that someone will say yes is very low. So 5 or 10% of those 50 meetings would probably be a follow-up meeting. If you have a track record, you already know the people that you're talking to, then you might actually be able to push that numbers up quite significantly. But I'd say 10-15% conversion on the meeting like that is kind of common. And it's really important to ask questions as well, so you don't do like our friend here, just tooting the horn too hard. It's important to just listen in, see if you actually fit their investment thesis, because in some cases they might not be interested in investing in AI at all. Sometimes they do, consumer products, sometimes they do space tech, and sometimes they actually do AI. So it's kind of depends on who you're talking to. So before you go into a meeting like that, probably do some research. A good advice that I got a couple of years back was really to make a list of like 20 VCs or investors that you'd really like to work with, and then just go through the list and have a conversation with them rather than just doing a pitch straight up all down. So that's something that I would keep in mind. Now, I think what I will do is I'll show you a couple of examples. So let's see if I can do this. I'll share my screen again. Okay, there we go. So this is a website or accelerator program called Y Combinator. They are very, very good at helping entrepreneurs progress and really figure out the source problem, what they're trying to solve for. And they have a lot of materials in terms of the what you should have in your pitch deck. Obviously, this pitch deck is just a sample, so it's a little bit for fun. But what we see usually is, as I said, 12, 15 slides-ish. The first one is really just a placeholder saying something like, this is our seed deck template, so your company name, and then describing text below what it actually means, right? Then onto the problem set. And usually problems, in this case, founders build bad seed decks. That's a big problem. So they are making fun of this because they help founders actually with this pitch, right? And then they just outline the main bullet points. What is the bigger problem here? This is obviously not designed, but just as a reference point. So it wastes huge amounts of time. Bad seed decks mean they don't raise money they need. No money means companies are forced to survive on revenue. So it's a pretty clear problem here, right? Usually it's not just 3 points, but it's built out to with some context to it as well. But in the end, this is really just the core of it, right? And then they have a text here saying, our template solves this problem. So if you're a startup, you'd say, with us, we solve this problem by this, or by selling widget X, and then explain what's unique about it. So in this case, it's fast to use, it's simple to explain, and it improves lives and cleans teeth. That's a silly point number 3, but regardless, it's explains what your solution actually do. Then in this case, they're kind of trying to provide some evidence, some traction on what you've been doing. So if you have built a prototype and you have some user metrics, you can put it in here. So in this case, all companies are using us in their portfolio, they mean. And they see they've shown a graph here, decks created per month, and then also some explanations in terms of what we see in the graph. So 50% growth month over month, every month, and 100% retention, which is important. Then they also move forward with some more traction metrics here that provides evidence that their solution is really the best. So money raised thanks to our deck, a lot of money, obviously, and then also some descriptions here. Then they go on to have more evidence, and also this is the business model. So like answering the question, how do we make money, with 3 different bullet points. Future growth, how will you scale from the position you're in right now to something new? And then also something about the team. If you can provide me with some brand logos, then I'm obviously super excited. If it says, like, I have a background from MIT, so if it says MIT, then I'm super curious to know more. If it's from Google, or one of the bigger companies, then also super intrigued, right? And then also a clear ask in the end, right? What do we need? And in this case, they need 1.5 million, and they'll use it for engineers and marketing. And with this money, they'll hit all the milestones. Okay, within 2 days, that's probably a little quick, but regardless, it's saying what they will need the money for. So this is usually what a pretty solid pitch deck looks like, and there are plenty of these. So you can, I'll post these into our chat later, so you can just have a look. But it's this, and there's also another pitch deck that has a little bit more flavor to it, so you can sort of see what they're thinking. There's also a very detailed description of how this works, or what you should think about when you do pitches like this. But obviously, don't make it as poorly designed as this one, because it's just text on a white piece of slide, right? So a little bit more fun than that. Moving on, I think that one thing you can also think about once you make your pitch, specifically for this event, is to do a short video of it, right? So you can do perhaps 30-second or a minute pitch, just saying who you are, what the problem that you're working on is, and sort of what your solution is. And then you can just go into a demo for a couple of minutes and show us how it actually works. And we're usually super impressed if you can show something that works with that, a nice scripted run through of what problem it is and how your prototype actually solves it. So I definitely recommend you to do that and try to just make it as crisp and clear as possible. We had one guy a couple of hacks ago that did a prototype. You can probably find it on our website as well, called Perfect Prompt, which basically is a prompt engineer engine, or a prompt engine that helps you find the perfect prompt for the model that you're using. And he did a really good pitch where he basically just sat down, went through, or presented himself, presented the problem real quick, and then just showed us how it worked, and then went through all the features and all that. And I think the pitch was something like 3-4 minutes ish, but it was really, really crisp and really clear. And so he also, I think, submitted a short, brief pitch deck. But the thing that really sticks with you is the videos. I'd really take some time, focus on that, make sure it's crisp and clear, because it's a lot easier to comprehend what you're trying to build. So yeah, that's now we went through quite a lot of material. We went through partially what people like, or what investors usually think about, which is make something that people love, and make sure that the problem is big enough for them to actually be able to invest in. And then we also went through, took some time to go through what should be included in the pitch. So create your small little blurb. Make sure you have all the pieces of content for your story. And then also we summarized all that with like what you should do now for your own specific case, which is really to, record a video, script everything, make sure it's nice, presentable, and then, show us a demo that works, and you can attach a pitch deck to it. That's usually the things that makes the most interesting pitches in that sense. So that's something that I definitely would do if I were in your position as of now. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time here, and I'm really looking forward to reviewing all of the submissions later tomorrow or tonight, and I'm sure we'll be super impressed by what you've created so far. So keep at it. Make sure you add the optics in terms of the presentation, and then just go for it. So thank you so much for listening into this. And if you have any questions, as always, you can reach out to me or Kuba or anyone else from the team in the chat.
Yes, and before we end, we had 2 questions in the chat. So the first one was if you could share your presentation.
Sure. Of course.
Please include with other links, and we will share it on Discord. And the second question was, do we need to have pitch presentation 10-12 pages?
Well, it helps for us to understand it, but I'd really focus on the video as firsthand, just to explain it. If you have some extra time, then put it into a pitch deck that explains it to you, and it's probably more for your own sake, because it forces you to be stringent and sort of think through all the different points that you're trying to make. So I'd probably use the pitch deck just as a script, right, for your video. But yeah, you don't have to submit it. It's nice to have, but it's not a necessity. We wouldn't discount it in any way if you don't set it in. But focus first on the video, and then if you have some extra material, then that sort of obviously puts you ahead a little bit if you can make that as well. Good luck, guys, and see you soon.